Hello, everybody, and welcome to Great Out Entertainment. This is a different voice. You're not used to this voice, are you? It's not Kobi's voice, it's Lynnon's voice, because today I am hosting this episode because it's in my area of expertise. But I'm still joined by the lovely and illustrious Kobi.
Hello!
Enchanted. Wow. So, Warhammer is to be made into a movie and TV show by Amazon, starring Henry Cavill. I can't believe Henry Cavill is going to be in it, because he loves the show. He loves just the whole universe of Warhammer. He loves all the lore behind it, and he even plays the tabletop game. And I'm sure he plays lots of video games as well, because he's a big video game nerd as well. So he has a big say in it. And basically what today's episode is going to be is I'm going to be teaching Kobi a lot about the lore of Warhammer, and maybe some of you, in a very summarized version, because the universe of Warhammer is so expansive that it's going to take me a while to cover everything. It's going to take multiple podcasts. So instead, I've summarized most of the main things that lead up to the events of Warhammer 40K, and I'll specifically be talking about Warhammer 40K today because that's what the film and the TV show will be set in. And hopefully after that we can have a little discussion and decide what we think Henry Cavill might do in the show, what he might be, what he might play, what the story might be about, and our opinions of what we think is the best thing to do, and have our own opinions, basically.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because, first off, it's so awesome that you're taking the lead in this one. Nice.
First time, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, 90 episodes in, now it's a nice change of pace. And also interesting because I'm pretty much going into this completely blind.
Yeah. I've taken the reins from this. I spent quite a few weeks delaying this episode as well, just to make sure everything is all ready, as well as just life events keep popping up, so this kept being delayed. But because of that, it's actually better because I was able to work on basically just a summarized version of most of the lore and just being able to explain it within hopefully 2 hours.
Roughly, we'll see how we go. Because again, with these podcasts, they either tend to be like 2 hours or 3. Or on better days, they can be just an hour.
I could have a Fry moment from Futurama where it took me an hour to write, but took me 10 minutes to read. But I thought it would take me an hour to read. So I've got about 10 pages of stuff to read. So we better get cracking.
I am all ears, mate.
So first off, the way I'm going to start is I'm going to mention everything about Games Workshop and Warhammer, just very quick, before we even jump into the lore. So for those of you that don't know, Warhammer 40K is a miniature tabletop game produced by Games Workshop, and it's the most popular miniature game in the world. The first edition rulebook was published in 1987, and the latest, the 10th edition, was this year, 2003. So it started in the 80s by a couple guys in their basement, and it's taken them many, many years, and the newest edition has come out this year.
2003, this year?
Yeah. The newest edition of the rulebook for the tabletop game has come out this year. So That's what I mentioned to you about a week ago, saying they've changed some of the lore, and I'm panicking.
Oh no!
Because that was midway working through my lore thing. They didn't change much, but they've added a couple things, which I will very, very briefly go over.
Okay, because you caught me off guard for a second, thinking, this year, 2003.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so that's that.
So it's still going today, and so every couple of years they post a new edition of the rulebook, which changes some things, makes some balance updates, makes certain units worth more or less points. Basically, like in a game, it buffs or nerfs characters and races to just make sure the game is fair and square, and also possibly adds new units and new lore into that as well at the same time.
Okay.
So they do these massive, basically, updates in physical books. Like a game update would just be you'd upload it, download it. Sorry. Since it started, it's grown exponentially into not just the tabletop scene, but into the gaming scene and the media scene. Companies like Havoc have come into our lives and made some of the best Warhammer games ever, including the Dawn of War series. Fat Shark has come into our lives and made some of the games like Vermintide and Darktide, which are phenomenal games. If I'm wrong about any of this information, please do correct me in the comments. By the way, I'm trying my best. But yeah, it's grown into this massive scene, and it's got a massive culture behind it from multiple different areas. So I personally do collect Warhammer miniatures, and I've been collecting them since I was probably about 10 years old. With a couple breaks in between, I got into it at a very young age and built the models and painted them very poorly, very poorly. And I started off with the Eldar. I'll go through a whole explanation of all the races so you do understand, for those of you at home and Kobi, what the hell I'm talking about. I personally started collecting Warhammer 40K miniatures when I was about 10 to 12 years old. I've had a couple breaks in between my life since then, from building and collecting, because first off, it's an extremely expensive hobby. I wouldn't say it's one of the most expensive hobbies, but it's definitely to buy nowadays a box that used to be worth about £10 to £15 is now like £35 to £45. So it's very expensive to do, but that does definitely not stop me, especially now that I have my own money as an adult. And I'm currently 26 and I still build and paint them. And it's a phenomenal hobby, and I absolutely get so much satisfaction from building and creating these things by hand myself. However, I don't actually play the tabletop, so I have nowhere to use them. I just collect them. And I'm thinking about making dioramas with them instead of using them on the wargame table. I think I'm going to enjoy that more, because the tabletop game is actually extremely complicated. You have to follow the rule books. Units are worth a certain amount of points, and you can only have a certain amount of points on the battlefield. So you've got to go through the whole rule book, find what is worth what with what weapons and stuff like that. Then you've got loads of dice rolls, and it's a very complicated game with lots and lots of steps to it.
Yeah, I get the impression that this sounds like, I mean, I wouldn't say it's like inspired by it, but it sounds very similar to Dungeons and Dragons, where there's all these moving pieces for just trying to get into the game or the world just by the game in this case. So I imagine, because I remember asking my other friends for years, like, "Oh, can you show me how to get into D&D?" And they're like, "You can't just get into it. You have to go through all these loopholes and setups just to."
It's quite a big game to just kind of get into. You can just jump into D&D. Unlike Warhammer, you don't have to collect any miniatures for D&D. You can just do it by paper, books, and imagination.
Okay.
But it does feel a lot nicer when you do have models on the table. And one of the things I want to use my Warhammer models for eventually is like get certain ones that can be transferred into the D&D world and build and paint them for a D&D campaign. So I'm thinking in that terms more of the Warhammer Fantasy. So before I continue and before I explain any more, I'm going to say that Gamers Workshop do have a couple other tabletop games based in Warhammer worlds, but not Warhammer 40k. So I'll just do a little brief rundown. So there's Warhammer Fantasy Age of Sigmar, which is more swords and shields, medieval times, with different races than what is in 40k, but slight references to 40k races, which you'll see when I explain the lore. And that has more to do with magic, and it's all based on one planet. So everyone on the planet is battling for domination, and that is basically Age of Sigmar. That tabletop game is apparently a lot more simple to play because it just involves like squads with set health, melee combat, which is a lot easier to do than ranged gun combat on a tabletop game, and magic. And it pretty much it flows a lot better, and apparently it's a lot easier to get into and play. But unfortunately, I don't collect the fantasy models. I just collect the 40k because I like lasers and pew-pews, so and aliens and shit. So I've not really collected the other things. There's also a new one called Warhammer Horus Heresy, which is set before the events of 40k, around the 30k millennium. So it's slightly different, and it's more to do with the Imperium of Man and their greatest civil war that they've ever had, which I'm going to go through very briefly closer to the end. And they even do a Middle Earth tabletop game.
Oh,
You can get Legolas and all your favourite heroes and build and paint them, and get Gondor troops. You can be the Orks. You can be anything you want. And they made a tabletop game with the Middle Earth license, which I think is phenomenal.
so is that? I know rights wouldn't allow it, but does that mean that Tolkien is essentially somewhat canon to the Warhammer?
Well, not quite. So it's basically, think of all these tabletop games as separated into their own universes.
Okay.
So a lot of people seem to think Warhammer Fantasy Age of Sigmar is set before the events of Warhammer 40K, but that is just simply not true. The Age of Sigmar is its own universe. Think of it as a completely different universe, and Warhammer 40K has references and nods to it, but they are completely separate. It's a different universe, different dimension, different thing entirely. So is Middle Earth. Think of Middle Earth that way as well. It's its own universe. It's set in the Middle Earth universe, isn't it? So it's just completely different. The Horus Heresy, however, that is in tie with 40k because it's just a prequel, basically. Prequel tabletop game. Interesting.
Okay. Wow, that's a lot. And we've just started.
Yeah, I've gotten maybe 2 sentences down, 10 more pages to go. So, I'm going to crack on.
Get some water, folks. It's going to be a long listen.
Right, straight into the lore. The universe itself is grim and dark with nothing but war and destruction, and don't expect anything else, really. Because you're not going to get anything else, you're just going to get pain, torture, blood, and violence. And that is pretty much why I love Warhammer the way I do, because it's so brutal. It doesn't give room for too much peace option. it's all war on a galactic, unimaginable, unfathomable scale. So that's what I love about it. It's very cosmic, very cosmic horror almost.
Ooh, charming.
So the best way I can think to start is talking about the warp. So the warp seems like a sensible place to start in such a chaotic universe, and it's set in our own Milky Way. So everything, by the way, is set in our galaxy, our real galaxy, the Milky Way. The warp is a psychic dimension parallel to real space, and the warp is where the Chaos Gods reside. There are 4 Chaos Gods: Wrathful Khorne, Devious Tzeentch, Pestilent Nurgle, and the Cruel Slaanesh. All are jealous and prideful deities, each believing themselves to be destined to be the supreme ruler of all existence. I'm going to go through a list of who the Chaos Gods are. We have Nurgle, also known as the Plague Lord, is the Chaos God of disease, decay, death, and destruction. In particular, the emotion of despair in mortals empowers him, and anything that dies and decays empowers him also. He is known also as the Grandfather Nurgle, the Lord of Pestilence and the Lord of Decay. So he is basically the god where if anything dies, he gets power from that. So he is essentially the god of death.
Okay.
But it's also the death of famine and pestilence. Then we have Khorne, also called the Blood God and the Lord of Skulls, the Chaos God of blood, war, and murder. His domain covers the most basic and brutal of sentient emotions and actions, such as hate, anger, rage, war, killing, and funnily enough, honour.
Oh.
For some reason, he's very honourable. Within all that blood and destruction. And you may have heard the term skulls for the skull throne, because that is where Khorne resides, on this massive skull throne. Everyone that dies, he takes his skull and it gets added to his throne of epic proportions.
Damn, so that puts the Iron Throne to shame, I guess.
By a couple light years, yeah. Then we have Tzeentch, also known as the Changer of Ways, is the chaos god of change, evolution, intrigue, and sorcery. He who weaves the threads that connect every action, plot, and subtle intrigue in the galaxy-wide game of manipulation and subterfuge. So, any plan, scheme, or anything that has been thought of, he is behind it all and he can change it. So he's a big influence on terms of war planning and strategies and things like that. So he becomes a very annoying god. Then we have Slaanesh, also known as the Dark Prince, the Prince of Pleasure, the Lord of Access, the Perfect Prince, and even the Prince of Chaos to the Imperium of Man. It's the chaos god of pleasure, excess, and decadence, which is the indulgence of pleasure or luxury. Lust, pride, and self-indulgence are the hallmarks of all that will follow him. So anyone that likes to indulge and basically just be a bit too prideful, really. So now you know a little bit about the gods and the warp. I'm going to talk about our first major plot point, the war in heaven. The reason I'm starting with the war in heaven is because it's the first notable thing in Warhammer history that happens. And I think I've spoke to you a very tiny bit about this before, haven't I, Kobi?
Roughly, I do recall. I mean, this is months ago, back when we I think this conversation actually originated the idea to talk about this on the podcast.
Yeah.
But I think you briefly mentioned it about this big conflict that set up the universe, or at the very least, like, again, based off what I briefly remember, it was a big conflict that has repercussions throughout everything.
Yes. So this basically sets up, the way you said it, everything. This is the first major conflict, and this is a story about some of the first spacefaring races. So this is set way before the events of 40K or 30K, the Horus Heresy, set all the way at 0K essentially, and basically starts off our entire universe. So there's intelligent life already in the universe somewhere, except we're going to start with the first ever spacefaring race, the Old Ones. There's no images online of this race, but they are described as reptile-like humanoids. Of course, it's always the reptilians. They were a mysterious race with a lifespan of thousands of years, if not longer, and had an amazing understanding of the warp. Set around 60 million years before 40K, which is current events. Another race, the Necrons, were more technologically advanced than them, but didn't have an understanding of the warp, at least like the Old Ones did. They also were at a major disadvantage from the start, being killed by their own sun with radiation, which over generations was ingrained in their DNA, so even solar system travel and getting off planet couldn't help them. They were stunted by this, and it made their life expectancy extremely low. The Necrons were blighted by civil war in their own dynasties, so in an attempt to save their race, they asked the Old Ones for the secrets of long life, but the Old Ones refused. So the Necrons banded together against the Old Ones and started a war. They got absolutely smashed back to their own solar system. So they controlled quite a good portion of the galaxy, but they got beaten back right to their own star.
Oof.
This is mainly due to the Old Ones using the warp to quote-unquote step from one side of the galaxy to the other. The Old Ones were able to exploit the Immaterium, allowing them to travel across the galaxy at a whim through the development of transdimensional warp space tunneling technology. And a network of warp gates, later called the Webway by the Eldar, that instantaneously connected their far-flung interstellar colonies. This made it impossible to fight against their speed of reinforcements, because the way they would travel the way the Necrons would travel the warp is not the same. So the webways were a very safe tunnel and basically a pocket dimension to travel through it. But the other way I would describe is as if the warp was an ocean and it had waves and it was turbulent. Imagine a tunnel under the water. That is the webway. And sailing over the seas, the rough seas, and being subject to all of nature's wrath. That is basically like traveling the warp normally.
Okay.
But the Necrons could do that. However, they couldn't figure out how to make tunnels, so they were subject to sometimes being lost and killed in the warp, and it took them a lot longer to travel to and from, whereas they had direct access via webways to get from one point to the other. So the Old Ones were at a big advantage when it came to getting reinforcements places where they needed to be. So this made it so difficult for the Necrontyr to fight, even though they had a technological advantage. So they were beaten back to their own solar system and pretty much their own planet, their first ever planet. One day, a Satan, what I call a star vampire, appeared at the Necrontyr's star. The Satan, also known as the Necron star gods, are a race of etheric creatures believed to be the first intelligent life in the Milky Way galaxy. In their true form, they are immense energy creatures able to slowly engulf entire stars. The Satan travel from solar system to feed off of the star's energy. So, when one star dies, move on. Go to find the next star and eat that. And it significantly reduces the star's life expectancy and causes it to supernova a lot earlier. So, it only reduces the life expectancy of a star by a couple million years or maybe a billion, but in subject to how long a race lives, that is usually it's not a problem for them. So whether it was eating their star or not, they were going to die anyway. But somehow the Necrontyr were able to communicate with the Catan and convince it to transfer its soul into what the Necron made, which is basically a living metal physical body. So with the help of the Satan now on their side, the Necrontyr were able to push back the Old Ones and all the way into their webway portals. With the power of the Satan at their side, they managed to completely turn the war around and push them back all the way to their tunnels.
Damn.
The Old Ones then panic and begin to seed in locations around the galaxy in a last-ditch effort to save themselves. This seeding is basically what brought our main Warhammer races into the galaxy. So the Old One's basically the grandfather of all our psychic races. For now, I'll list them and then go back to them and explain them later. But the main races they seeded were the Eldari, or Eldar, the Krork, or the Orks, and even the primate-like ancestors of humanity. The Eldar, however, were the favourite of the Old Ones due to their psychic abilities and connection to the warp, and they were taught a ton of their secret, mysterious knowledge of the warp and given access to the webways. At this point, the war was lasting thousands of years, and with the help of all the other races that the Old Ones made, they came to a stalemate. Both sides were equally as strong as each other, and for thousands of years they were battling back and forth for little bits of land. So this was lasting far too long. Both sides were becoming very attritioned, so someone had to think of something. The Necrontyr got a bit worried and why they couldn't beat them, even though they had this technological advance and the Satan on their side. So a Satan named the Deceiver comes along. And he approaches King Zarek, which is the Silent King, and offers him immortality. And basically offers the entire race immortality and ever-living bodies. And this is exactly what the Necrontyr have wanted since the beginning. This is the whole reason the war has started. It's the whole reason they approached the Old Ones with the secrets of immortality, and they refused. So they're finally getting what they want after thousands of years of war and generations of Necrontyr dying by the hands of the Old Ones. The Necrontyr barely hesitated and took the offer, and this was pretty much the beginning of the end of the Necrontyr.
Mm.
As you would imagine, if they trust someone called the Deceiver.
I think it's a bit on the nose, guys.
But they didn't care. They wanted it. They wanted it so badly. The Deceiver and the other Satan then begin the transference. This has been described as giant furnaces which King Zarek commands his legions to jump in. When Necrontyr goes into a furnace, Its physical body is stripped away, as well as their souls, and their consciousness is put into a soulless living metal body. The Deceiver quickly realised that souls taste way better than stars, and got the other Satan to pretty much do the same and eat the souls.
Jesus.
Depending on your political stature, you would have been a certain level of consciousness in these new bodies. Peasants and soldiers would have no free will and would remain mindless robots for all of eternity. Leaders and commanders would have a higher state of consciousness, and the King Zarek and a few others would have full consciousness. As soon as the transference is done, King Zarek realizes what a terrible mistake he's made, and he essentially enslaved his entire race and condemned their souls, which is devastating to him. All in the power of immortality.
I can barely imagine so.
So, what do we have now? We now have a race with superior technology, the Satan, who are masters of the material universe, and the warp doesn't work on them with their bodies that can repair themselves. And now we have the Necrons with the same bodies of the Satan made out of living metal, and they now have the power they need to completely destroy every trace of the old ones. King Zarek, the Silent King, wants to reverse this, but he bides his time. He waits until the end of the war with the old ones and starts a revolt. So after they've completely wiped out the old ones, he then says, okay, we need to get back at the Satan for this. The Necrons use their technology to make energy beams and turn them on the Satan. You can destroy a Satan's physical body, but not its energy form. But the bodies that the Necrons made for the Satan blew up into shards containing fragmented energy of the Satan. They're essentially massive batteries. So they went from being enslaved basically by the Satan to turning them into infinite power sources.
God damn. It just feels like it's just getting crazy already.
Again, this is a very brief description of basically the war in heaven, as much as I can. Have you kept up so far? Are you all good?
For the most part, yeah. I'm just trying to figure out, like, wow, all this happened in just like the first big conflict.
Yeah. Lasting a long, long time, but still, yeah, one of the first conflicts ever. What are you thinking so far?
I mean, so far I'm thinking, okay, we've already got one race that are being built up to be quite terrifying, considering their fates and also considering just the circumstances of what they've put themselves into. And I'm just now thinking, what's going to come next?
Well, we're near the end of the war in heaven now, so soon the war in heaven will be done, but I've got a lot of other explaining to do. So, before the war between the Necrons and the Old Ones, the warp was fairly safe and quite easy to travel, allowing for hyperspace travel for races that couldn't use the webway or didn't understand the webway. But after this war, where the Old Ones become defeated, it became turbulent, making it extremely difficult and dangerous to traverse. The Eldar at this point have become a massive force and could travel the warp safely via the webways, so they didn't have to worry about that. After eons of war, the Necrons have been through battling the Old Ones and then the Satan. The Silent King didn't think he could win taking on the Eldar too now, especially with the warp being impossible to traverse, and they have the webways. It's pretty much back to square one, if they did start a war. The Silent King controls all the other Necrons, so he sends them all to sleep in massive underground tombs for 60 million years. He then destroys the codes to control the Necrons, so no one may use them against him. Reflecting on his past actions, the Silent King and a few of his closest followers stay awake to check the tomb worlds throughout their slumber. These planets with massive underground labyrinths of catacombs are called tomb worlds, where millions of Necrons sleep. They are maintained by scarab bots and tomb spiders to ensure that they stay working all throughout their slumber.
Damn.
Ready for the 60 million year mark from when they may awake.
I mean, just listening to that piece there, I'm already thinking, Jeez, I wonder what kind of story we could tell with that bit alone.
There's a lot. There's a lot. So that pretty much sums up the War in Heaven. So before I continue, how are you feeling after learning a little bit about a brief history of the War in Heaven?
Damn, that's again. I said it a second earlier. If that's just like the first conflict, the first prologue, if you will, of this grand story, I'm already thinking, how has this not been done into a movie or a TV show before?
Honestly, well, the thing is, it has. So there's. I don't think there's many films, but there's definitely TV shows.
Huh.
There's a couple animated ones. There's a lot of fan stuff online and a lot of cinematics. Nothing like full-end TV show, but animated shows. I think there's Hammer and Bolter, and another show called, I think it's called Death Angels, and it's all about a space marine group of, I think it's a kill team, and yeah, it looks pretty cool. But I've not watched those. Hammer and Bolter looks cool though, because I saw one scene of that, and it had to do with Imperials getting ripped apart by Tyranids. And oh, don't worry, I'll explain a little bit about both those races in just a tad.
I mean, yeah. I mean, just the. I mean, maybe it's just because I've got a bit of Indiana Jones in my mind right now, but I mean, the thought of people going into the Necrons like hidden planet and just
some over these 60 million years were accidentally woken up by people like exploring and instantly dead.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm just thinking, how cool would a short series about that be? Like, just these explorers just trying to find something out there in the universe, and they stumble across this hidden planet, and then they find out, oh, there's something else here. Oh shit! What have we found here? Yeah. Oh no!
Release an entire tomb world full of Necrons, devastating race with Gorse weapons that basically break you down at molecular level. So it doesn't matter if you're wearing armor; it will just like break it down to a molecular level. They've got disgustingly strong weapons and very technology advanced. The Necrons can also do something called phasing, which allows them to go into basically a pocket dimension. So away from harm, they can, when they're about to die or be destroyed upon beyond repair, they'll pop into the pocket dimension, get repaired, and pop back. So they are terrifying. Even when they get shut down, dismantled, and destroyed, they eventually put themselves back together. If there is basically an overlord nearby. There has to be, I think, a commander Necron around to do that. But as long as he's alive, the Necrons keep picking themselves back up. So they're essentially terrifying skeletal robots that don't stop. Think of like Terminators that can repair themselves. Liquid Terminator, an army of them, essentially.
Oh no. Just what we need.
Yeah.
I mean, just putting it out there now, that already sounds bloody awesome. So, okay, so that's the War in Heaven.
Yeah.
So
the reason I went on about the War in Heaven, because it's essential for me to talk about the rest of the races, to give you an idea of where they came from and what their possible motives are. So I've kind of gone over the Necrons already and like the Eldar, but I'll do like a brief description of them in the next segment. Which, do you know what? I'll start now. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the history in between the events of the Necrons going to sleep and the events of the Horus Heresy, and that is the fourth and youngest of the four Chaos Gods, Slaanesh's birth, and how he came into existence, or it, should I say. So, the Eldar's empire was without equal. They were unchallenged masters of the stars and became massive in number, conquering every corner of the galaxy while the Necrons were asleep. The Eldari as a race were very physically... the Eldari as a race were very psychically attuned, so they had a very strong connection to the warp and its chaos energy. Due to this, they never really died. Instead, their soul went to the warp, and they could be pretty much fished back out and put back into a physical body. because they essentially couldn't die, they continued to grow and expand while becoming incredibly knowledgeable, wise, and learned most of the secrets of the universe, especially being taught by the Old Ones. However, millennia ago, their overwhelming combined emotions and their hedonistic practices, in which they were engaged in pursuit of pleasure, essentially self-indulgent, caused them for years to have dreams of a sleeping deity, but they continued regardless, and it led to cataclysm that all but just eradicated their kind and led to the birth of the chaos god Slaanesh. When Slaanesh was born, it let out a psionic cry so strong every Eldar for thousands of light years hears it and gets its soul ripped out of their body and thrown into the warp to be consumed by Slaanesh.
Jesus.
Yeah. So I did say at the beginning, this is grimdark with nothing but war and destruction. There's no happiness here. You see a smile, Slaanesh will turn that upside down. Some Eldar that were just out of range of this were driven mad, slew each other, and feasted on the corpses of their fellow kin. Basically, as if they saw Cthulhu and just went nuts. Very H.P. Lovecraft. But there's not a single Eldar out there, even out of range, that did not feel the pain because they're so psychologically connected to one another. With Slaanesh now residing in the warp, it continued to eat any Eldar soul that were to enter. To counter this, the remaining Eldar designed soul stones for their souls to go into to be reborn instead of the warp. However, if they break, the soul would be lost to the warp and consumed by Slaanesh. So they were limited in number, and they didn't really have a way to come back to life. They kind of did, and there's a very small number of them now. They basically got eradicated within seconds.
Wow.
So that is basically the birth of Slaanesh. What do you think about that?
First off, talk about high achievements when you've just been born.
Yeah, it's set the bar high, hasn't it?
Yeah, what are you famous for? Oh, I've only been born like a few seconds, and I've already caused the deaths of like so many beings. It's like
I'm talking billions, trillions, even.
Oh,
probably quadrillions. Like just too many.
I mean, just hearing that alone already feels like it's enriching this world, and I'm just trying to think of how would that look visual wise. I mean, I can't really just think of any other words to describe it.
It's basically unfathomable scale, so it'll be very impossible to do on screen.
I mean, you mentioned earlier it's pretty much like H.P. Lovecraft. That's very sort of in tune with that, where it's like
cosmic horror is beyond like something you can actually create. You know, all you can do is kind of think about its scale, and even then you don't come close to its true like size or what like the scale of what's happening. And that's why I really love about cosmic horror, and especially H.P. Lovecraft, which is one of the reasons I love Warhammer so much. It's because it's very cosmic horror. And also physical, brutal horror as well. Any other questions about the birth of Slaanesh?
Mainly just, so again, it's I'm more impressed. I am impressed really with just how people come up with this stuff. But now I'm curious, how do we, again, as I said earlier, how do we advance from here? How does this play into what comes next? Because there's so much. There's still so much setup happening.
If anything, this makes room for the rest of the races to grow and evolve, because the Eldar were incredibly powerful. They took over the entire galaxy. They were basically rulers of the stars for a long time, and they got bored. They started indulging in like pleasure and self-indulgence, greed, pride, mastery of their like martial prowesses and mastery of their skills, and basically all that psychic ability, because they were so psychically in tuned and they were made that way by the Old Ones. It caused the birth of a chaos god, because it uses psychic energy, uses the warp to function, to happen.
Okay, so in a way, in a roundabout way, Slaanesh was almost a necessary evil.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a necessary evil in order for 40k to be what it is, and not just everyone let's play the same race.
Wow. Again, I can't really say add anything to that other than
Every race pretty much has its ups and downs throughout this entire series. The humans have massive ups and downs, which I'm not going to go through in extent because the humans have the most lore behind them, the most books and the most stories. So it's almost impossible to actually cover most of the human stuff in one episode. So I'm not going to bother. I'm going to instead give you a brief rundown of the humans, what they're about, what their motives are, what they're like in this universe, and how they're faring against all the other races, and a little bit later the Horus Heresy. So I'll explain kind of a little bit, but I won't explain too much.
Okay.
Just simply because of time. Otherwise, we'll be here for weeks.
I mean, again, we've been here for probably close to half an hour now. And again, we're only just getting past the first two. But damn, mate, you just again, I'm so interested. I want to learn more.
Yeah, it's such a just an amazing series with so much potential that you can take pretty much anything from. But because it's so big as well, it's also so intimidating because you kind of almost have to turn it into a TV show first off because there's too much to cover in terms of just a film, unless you make the film specifically marketed towards that niche market where they already know the lore. Then it becomes a bit like you can do that, but a lot of studios don't do that because they want to make it for a wider audience, which I'm hoping is not going to be the direction of Amazon stuff. I'm hoping Henry Cavill will force it to be a niche thing, you know. But it's not really a niche thing because when I say niche, it is definitely like only Warhammer people would get it, but it is the number one Warhammer miniature tabletop game in the world. So it's very popular. So it's not like it's a small hipster market, you know. It's quite a massive community that is into this, from the gaming side to it, to the TV side to it, and from the tabletop side to it. So there's a lot of potential here to do cool things with it, and I'm hoping more studios pick it up, and not just gaming studios, although I do love the Warhammer games. They are so great.
Yeah, I mean, Warhammer, the brand itself, that's been going since, is it the 90s?
80s.
80s. Okay, so yeah. So they've definitely, I mean, just from that alone, they have a big fan base based on that longevity period.
Yes.
So they
picked up a lot of fans.
So I can only imagine how difficult it must have been to even get certain projects off the ground, let alone, we can try and make a show or a movie. I mean, again, just based off the...
It seems like they're being a bit more active in the media sense because they've started to release cinematics alongside all the rule books that they release with the new lore and the new troops in it and new battle groups as well. They tend to make cinematics for them now to tease them and build up hype for them, which is amazing because I need to see more. I need to see more. They're so good as well. They didn't do a terrible job of it. They did a fantastic job of the cinematics that they've done so far.
It's kind of like the Star Wars cinematic trailers, where it's like it makes you that much more invested in the world compared to the other products because there's so much effort and passion put into it.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know. Right, so now I'm going to talk about each main race that is currently set in 40k that we know today. I'm going to start with the Necrons, as I've pretty much covered them already, and they are the oldest spacefaring race in Warhammer. But we'll give you a brief description of them anyway. The Necrons are a Xenos species of humanoid, robotic, skeletal warriors that have lain dormant in their stasis tombs for more than 60 million Terran years, though they have begun to awaken at last and reclaim the galaxy. The Eldar are a faction of an ancient humanoid alien race. I would describe them as elf-like in appearance. They have pointy ears, but they are very, very alien-looking compared to elves. They are called the Eldari, whose vast empire once extended the entire known galaxy. After the birth of Slaanesh, the surviving Eldari, which were the children of Asuran, were forced to flee upon gigantic continent-sized starships called craft worlds. They now cling to survival by a thread, fighting the horrors of the galaxy with ritualized discipline and skill. Half the remaining race has become another faction, the Dark Eldar, which believe in torture and slavery and self-indulgence, and like to feed Slaanesh. And Slaanesh, in turn, protects them.
Oh, how pleasant.
Yeah. The Orks. This is one of my favourite races and the lore behind them. So I spent a little bit of time on this. So this one will probably be longer than the others.
I can already tell. So this is definitely like your go-to race.
Well, the Necrons are the race I collect and build. So my favourite race is the Necrons, just because of how cool they look. I like the cold metal, soulless aspect of them. But the Orks, in terms of their lore and everything about them, is just amazing. These guys are definitely my second choice. So the Orks, also called the Greenskins, are a savage and brutal species of humanoid spread all across the Milky Way. They have a combined biology of animals and fungi.
Oh.
So it's a very interesting aspect, but I'll explain it and you'll get why this is a thing. They are seen by their enemies and pretty much everyone else in the galaxy as violent and crude, but they are pretty much the most successful species in the whole galaxy, outnumbering possibly every other intelligent starfaring species, with the very plausible exception of Tyranids. This is due to their fungi-like way of reproducing. They reproduce and are born from spores that spread throughout their life and burst out spores when they are killed. So they can seemingly live forever unless they are killed, continuously growing and becoming smarter. Being numerous beyond belief and driven to war makes them one of the most dangerous alien species that plague the galaxy. No species is safe from the Orks. Their thirst and passion for war is unrivaled, but can become somewhat of a hindrance due to their need for a good fight. They will go out of their way only to just be slightly stronger than the opponent, which means if they encounter a planet that only has spears and crossbows, they will throw away their guns and pick up a club. Most Orks die in battle, either by fighting amongst themselves with rivaling factions and clans and tribes, or fighting others before they get too big and too smart. The ones that survive the endless war become massive and lead the others. They generate a unique psychic field that if enough of them really believe hard enough about something, it becomes reality, which I think is hilarious.
Gee.
They can accomplish many feats of engineering that might otherwise seem impossible, turning heaps of scrap and trash into working weapons and even starships. They have applied this to some rather interesting things, like colours. To Orks, if something is red, it goes faster, simply because they believe it to be so. Here's a list of colours and what the Orks believe they do. Red. Objects or beings that are red go faster. Red can also be described as brutal, since going faster helps them get into melee quicker. The most well-known and metic colour, red, is also associated with relatively disciplined and tactical Orks. It's the colour of the Commandos and the Blood Axes clan, who both use advanced tactics such as ambushes, unit organisation, and cover. Blue. Blue things are lucky. That goes both for safety and gain. Blue also means they're quite cunning. So if something is painted blue, it's lucky. And just because they believe it's to be so, it becomes a lucky object.
That's nice to know, because considering my favourite colour is blue.
And green. The best, because it's their own natural skin colour. Anything can be improved with green, even if the other colours actually add powers and green doesn't. greenskins may paint their non-green allies to help be more orky. Any attempts at diplomacy should probably involve the colour green. Yellow, associated with wealth. Although not because of gold, orcs use teeth as currency. Their teeth yellow fast, and so they associated the colour yellow with wealth. Orcs also believe yellow produces much better explosions.
Oh. Okay.
White represents death like bones. White is dangerous and can have multiple meanings, although generally it means fearlessness and the intent to kill. Black, associated with toughness. Anything black must be tougher and ardour. And last but not least, my favourite, purple. Simply because, have you ever seen a purple orc?
Not that comes to mind. No, I haven't.
Exactly.
Okay, just gotta say first off, that bit alone, again, already impressive. Just because, again, off the top of my head, thinking of other fantasy genres or just in general board games like D&D and other ones, because they all have, it's like a staple of a fantasy story or genre or game to have orcs in there in some form.
Yeah.
But the fact that they've got essentially orcs here, but they've taken all these interesting approaches to them in their culture or their how they just handle things, even just by the name. I'm assuming their orc is spelled with a K.
Yeah.
And that's like universal, at least in that world.
In Warhammer 40K it is, yeah.
Okay. But, I mean, when it comes to the colour description piece, I mean that's so creative. I mean, who thinks, I'm going to use teeth as currency? That's a detail that you probably wouldn't need.
They regrow their teeth really quick, so whenever a tooth falls out or gets punched out, they take it and it's currency.
Yeah, that's such a interesting detail that could easily just be overlooked, but it just adds that much more richness to the lore, and that's so cool.
Yeah, I love the orc lore. Everything about it is hilarious, and I'll explain a little bit of how they thought about it as well. And I'll only do that for this race because I only cared about this race enough to look deeper into it. So I'll give you a little tidbit of information at the end. So the psychic field that orcs produce is directly proportional to the number of greenskins that's present in a given location. An off-orcs in one area becomes a great warg. So this is partially a migration and also part holy war that can exterminate the populations of entire solar systems with their lust for war and violence. When orcs are on a rampage, the entire galaxy trembles. The gods of the orcs that they worship are Gork and Mork. They don't worship the chaos gods.
Okay.
The two massive orcs not belonging to the realm of chaos that continuously battle each other all throughout time. One is brutally cunning and the other is cunningly brutal. None of the orcs can agree which is which. In fact, they have no idea.
Oh.
So most of them worship both or fight over who they think is who.
Okay.
Fun fact, any orc that so much as touches the surface of a planet, that planet will forever become orc infested.
Oh, dear Jesus.
Only by extermination of the entire planet, by blowing it up, is the only way to get rid of an orc infestation. You can kill the orcs down to a level where they only become savage tribes, thoughtless savage tribes, so they don't make guns and everything, so they're not much of a threat to the forces of 40k. However, if they are left alone for too long, they will group up, become smart, and start reproducing at levels unfathomable.
And I thought the Necrons were a difficult race to deal with.
Oh, we haven't even got to the most difficult race. So this is one of the most dangerous and brutal races about. But there's another race after this that is also just awful. So, a little fun fact about the orcs: they are based off of football hooligans in England.
Oh?
Yeah, they were. So all their lower Gothic speak, which is basically less intelligent way of speaking. So instead of harder, they'll say arder. Teeth, spelt with an F instead of a TH. Things like that. And they are basically essentially like some orc leaders are actually named after British icons, somewhat, and only if you know that will you be able to piece it together. So I think there was one called Magnus Thrasher, and that was Margaret Thatcher. So yeah, fun little fact about them, based off of football hooligans, which is probably why they added the thing with colour, because football hooligans think they have a magical power when they wear a football jersey.
Ah, interesting. That's a bit of trivia for the day.
Yeah, I won't do that with any of the other species because orcs is just too funny. On to the next species. The Tyranids are an insect-like species of Xenos, arriving quite late into the story of 40k and seemingly coming from a neighbourhood galaxy. They actually comprise of an entire spacefaring ecosystem comprised of innumerable different biomes that are variations of the same theme. Even their starships are massive flying Tyranid bioforms. They are the ultimate predators, controlled by some kind of hive mind. To them, all living things, from plant life and lowly insects to the most advanced spacefaring civilizations, they're just mere prey. The Tyranids threaten the extinction of all life, consuming, absorbing, and repurposing the biomass of everything living on the planet. Even the oceans get absorbed. They do this just to make more Tyranids via the spawn pools, so that they can eat, essentially, more planets. Every planet they encounter that can't be defended will be consumed and left as a barren husk within only a few weeks. They cannot be stopped. They cannot be reasoned with. They will consume. That is the Tyranids.
I'm already thinking of that being a cool tagline for a future season. Oh, wow. And first off, cool name already.
Yeah.
Another cool name. And I don't know why, but my mind is immediately jumping to the aliens from Live, Die, Repeat. And I'm sure they have nothing in common with them. But the fact that, again, we've got another race that is like so efficient in like hostile takeover in just a matter of weeks. That sounds intimidating as hell, and it's, again, we're thinking about it for story purposes. That just sounds so cool.
Oh, I just realised. So I just quickly looked up Live, Die, Repeat, and that is it also called The Edge of Tomorrow?
It is. I think that's actually, the Live, Die, Repeat is considered the tagline sometimes, or the subtitle.
That's a pretty cool actual title though.
It's a good movie. I'd recommend it.
Yeah, I've seen it. It's very good.
Nice.
Yeah, so they're kind of like that, except they're not all-knowing like those aliens are. That's what made them so scary, was the fact that they could predict the future.
Yeah.
But these ones are just, I would say they more resemble the alien from Alien.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Ooh.
So not pure black and as horrible as that single alien, but they definitely share characteristic traits with them.
Okay.
Acid spitting and the same kind of general shape, I would say, like on the sprinting on the very spindly hind legs, with claws bigger than your life, and a tail that can cut you in half at a single swish. Yeah, they're a brutal race. That even their guns are made from biomass that shoot little parasites that eat through armor and into the host's body. Ooh. And eats them from the inside and kills them.
That is literally Alien put up to max 10.
Yeah. So instead of face huggers putting the alien inside, waiting for it to burst out, they shoot these little things that do that for them.
Yeah, it's like,
from a distance, from a range, Kobi.
Damn, it's like, we're not going to be gentle. We're not going to suddenly put something in you and then it's going to burst out. No, we're going to fucking shoot you.
We're going to shoot you with a parasite that will eat you from the inside out if it doesn't immediately kill you. Cool.
Damn. again, props to the creativity department for coming out with all that alone.
Yeah, honestly impressive. So what do you think of the Tyranids overall? What's your opinion on them?
I mean, yeah, we sort of briefly touched on it a second ago, but that sounds interesting. I mean, I guess compared to the Eldritch God ones we talked about earlier and the Orks, these feel like, I mean, as you said, they're very much like your stereotypical humanoidish aliens.
Yeah, like
And
insectoid, like alien kind of things.
that's a better description. Yeah, that sounds very familiar, and we've seen a lot of that in sci-fi, esque elements, or I wouldn't say fantasy.
I don't think we've seen it to this scale though. In terms of how, I think the closest thing I could describe the scale to is the Zerg from StarCraft. If you are aware of them, they are very Tyranid like. But yeah, the Zerg are a tad different. They don't work the same way.
Well, I'd say again, it's very creative with just how they they're handled. From, as you said, from how they reproduce, right through the literally shooting their enemies and creating new beings from that bullet, and then just again the concept of them being able to so efficiently massacre entire planets.
Before something as well, I'll describe about the Tyranids. When they have picked a planet to go to, they don't have interstellar travel like all the other races do. They can't warp jump, so they slowly travel from planet to planet via their massive bioships. So this takes a very long time. While they're on the way to these ships, they do reach very high speeds, so they get there very, very quick. But compared to warp travel, it's so much slower. It's like weeks compared to a minute. So they will eventually get there, but while they're on the way, somehow the planet knows. The planet is scared. Tsunamis happen, earthquakes happen, the world basically trembles. All up until the arrival of the Tyranids, where they absorb every little bit of biomass from the planet.
God damn it, man. How have you made this even more cool?
Also, even with all of that, if they decide they want to weaken a planet before arriving, they'll send a gene stealer cult ahead. So what a gene stealer is, it's a special type of Tyranid that will infiltrate a civilization and steal the DNA of whatever is in that civilization and basically become one of them, learn from them, and basically start a cult within that following to be powerful enough to start a revolution, basically, and take over the planet that way.
Jesus Christ!
Or at least assist in that.
We've just got entered full-on invasion of the body snatchers territory here.
Yeah, they do a lot. They do their hard work for the universe. Thank you, Tyranids. Always consuming, hungry bastards.
And again, I'm not sure if this was influenced by the H.P. Lovecraft, but that does feel very Lovecraftian as well.
Yeah, like, it does, doesn't it?
Worshippers of cults and such. Again, I'm gonna try and hold back because I'm just I just want to keep saying that is so cool. That's so interesting. There's so much potential with just this concept.
Tyranids are going to be the main antagonists of one of the newest Warhammer games coming out called Warhammer Space Marine 2. The first Space Marine game, their antagonists were mainly Orks, and it's great, but we've seen it so many times before. What we haven't really seen is Tyranids. So I'm very grateful that there's going to be Tyranids in the next game. It's going to make it fucking brutal.
Whoa.
So, on to the next race, the Tau. Probably the most peaceful race in this entire lore. So, enjoy it while it lasts, because it won't last long.
Well, so we should be so grateful.
So, the Tau are a rapidly expanding multi-species Xenos with a stellar empire situated in a small space of the galaxy. They are a very, very small empire compared to every other race, but they are extremely technologically advanced with very powerful weapons, but there is very few of them, and they can't interstellar travel. Instead, what they do is they quote-unquote skim across the warp, which is a lot slower than warp travel, but it's a very short distance version of it. But that's all they can do, because they don't have any psychic abilities to be in the warp. So the Tau were a very segmented race until the Ethereals came along and guided them under the philosophy for the greater good. Very hot fuzz. The greater good. But yes, they believe in the greater good. So they were composed into 4 castes, basically 4 clans, each in charge of a different aspect of their civilization. The Water caste, which were very graceful and handled everything political, and had an incredible ability to be able to negotiate with pretty much any race, and seemingly very effectively somehow. They can even propose deals and diplomacy with the Xenos-hating species humans, or Orks. They've not had much luck with Tyranids, but they haven't met the Tyranids, I don't think. So if they do, it does mean the death of their race, because they're so tight-knit together within only 1 to 2 solar systems big. So I'm not too sure about the Tyranids, actually. I need to look into that. So that's the Water caste. The Fire caste, the warriors of the 4 clans, comprised of ground troops and are just built stronger than the other castes biologically. They're a lot more muscular, a lot more built for war. The Earth caste, the builders and the engineers of the race, manage the creative side and build technological feats for the cause. And finally, we have the Air caste, built very weak and brittle. They were the flyers and the pilots, controlling and captaining all of their spaceships and planes due to gravity being just a bit too much for them. Tau actually tend to be peaceful when possible, asking others if they will join their cause voluntarily instead of fighting them. However, in a very Warhammer fashion, if it's refused, they'll take the planet anyway and absorb it into their empire, for the greater good. The greater good.
Damn, I mean...
Watching Hot Fuzz for too long has ruined us, I think.
I mean, at least they asked.
Yeah, at least they asked. It's very... That's a very, Warhammer thing.
I mean,
we asked, but we'll take it anyway.
We asked first. Clearly, they're the ones in the wrong here.
That's the thing. That is the kindest species in all of Warhammer, because no one else asks. They just take. It was only 6,000 Terran years before how they are currently that they were discovered just mastering the fire and wheel. So they advanced extremely quickly. And the humans basically discovered them while they were discovering fire and wheel for the first time. 6,000 years, they came back and found an entire empire of spacefaring, super technology, intelligent species. So, wow, whoops, probably shouldn't have overlooked that one. Last, but definitely not least, because there's a lot to cover within this last one, the Imperium of Man. This is massive, so I'm going to talk briefly about them, their sub-factions, and I'm not even going to mention all of the sub-factions. Humans in this universe, compared to most other sci-fis, are pretty much one of the most numerous and powerful races in the Milky Way. Led by the Emperor of Man, they spread his light throughout the galaxy, destroying any heretic and Xenos alike without exception. Here's a list of some of the main forces of the humans. The Astra Militarium, also called the Imperial Guard, is the Imperium's standing army, a mind-bogglingly huge force of human soldiers, tanks, and aircraft drawn from Imperial worlds all over the galaxy, of which they control a lot of. They're the first line of defense and attack in humanity's never-ending war for survival and domination. The average lifespan of a guardsman from recruit to death is about 15 hours.
15?
15 hours.
What?
There are trillions of Imperial Guardsmen. Trillions spread all throughout the galaxy, fighting on the fronts that the other soldiers of man could barely hope to reach because of their low number.
Damn. Talk about making your life worthwhile.
Yeah. It's like Starship Troopers. Join us. I'm doing my part, and then you get killed within like 5 minutes in the training. Oh, yeah, that is the life of Imperial Guardsmen. Given they a fun fact about the Imperial Guardsmen is when they're given their laser weapon, their laser rifle, also known as a las rifle, they are told it's the most powerful weapon, and it can, if they believe hard enough in the Emperor, it can kill anything in one shot. Of course, this makes it so that they are a lot braver and face more terrible dangers and horrific Xenos and shoot them and then realise it doesn't actually kill them in one shot. It kills them in about 50,000 shots because it's an extremely weak weapon. But it does kill eventually.
Damn.
This is so that it makes them brave and charge through the front lines. The Imperial Guardsmen also had something called commissars behind them, barking orders at them and very trigger happy. And not trigger happy in the way towards the enemy. If they see an Imperial Guardsman running away from the battle, they will shoot him to make an example for the others.
Well, they definitely take their job very seriously.
So what would you rather do? Die fighting in an honourable death against horrible Xenos horrors? Or would you rather get shot by one of your own guys and die a coward's death? They don't give you much of an option. Fleeing is not an option. Desertion is not an option. Once you join the military, even if it is your choice, that's it. That's it for you.
Oh, God.
Funny enough, there is retirement.
Oh.
They offer retirement for any Imperial soldier that lives long enough.
Let me guess. There's only been since they've been established, maybe there's been only 3.
There's pretty much, yeah. There's only been a couple.
Oh.
There's only been a couple, and when you do, your service is pretty much not done, even if you retire. When you retire, you get given a planet, and you are to rule that planet. That is yours. That is your planet. You've survived being an Imperial Guardsman. That is phenomenal. Here's a planet. Could be Ork infested, so you may die. But there you go. So you'll probably be fighting forever. There you go. Fight for your planet.
Damn.
It's such a lowball way of getting the Imperial Guardsmen, even in retirement, to keep working for the Imperium. I love it.
Oh my. I mean, wow.
They are the cucks of the Imperium. They get fucked.
Oh wow. God, poor Imperiums. I mean,
Guardsmen.
Guardsman, yeah. God damn it. Wow, what a profession to choose.
Yeah, wouldn't want to be a human in this universe. One of the reasons Warhammer is one of the only series where people can turn around and be like, hell no, I don't want to be born in the Warhammer universe. Think of any other universe. Star Wars, people want to go into that. That sounds cool.
Doctor Who.
Doctor Who, yeah, that sounds cool. Star Trek, yeah, that sounds really cool. Warhammer, hell no. I'll be indoctrinated into the army and be killed within 15 hours. No. There is no... You won't be born a hero. You won't be born a space marine. You'll be an Imperial Guard as a human, and you'll be fucking dead within 15 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, we like to think we might be like the unsung hero or the one to save us all, but in reality, we'd mostly just end up being like the guards.
Yes. So, funny enough, I'm going to talk about the Space Marines next, which are the poster boys of the Imperium and Warhammer 40K as a whole. When a lot of people think of Warhammer, they first think of the Space Marine. They are the most famous.
I am aware of, because I've seen you've talked about them briefly before. I just know for a fact that these are the guys with blue armor, aren't they?
Well, not necessarily. There is a chapter of them called the Ultramarines, which I'll get into, which wears blue armor. But there's a lot of different chapters that wear different coloured armour.
Okay.
but these guys are basically in the massive hulking spacesuits. And I'm going to describe the Space Marines now. So they are 9 foot tall, genetically enhanced super soldiers, the Space Marines, aka the Adeptus Astartes. March into battle with massive suits of power armor adorned with the colours of whatever their chapter is. The Emperor created the Space Marines over 10,000 years before the current 40k era, intending them to be the ultimate force to conquer the entire galaxy. But that didn't quite go to plan. But now they're stronger than ever, reinforced and upgraded with the Primaris Space Marine variants. They form the tip of the spear in all of humanity's wars, paving the way for far more numerous Astra Militarum troops to land and do all the donkey work of the conquest. So, in terms of Space Marines, let's talk scale of how hard it is to become a Space Marine and how rare they are.
Okay.
So, imagine you are a peasant on a planet, you're a farmer, and that's all you do. And all of a sudden, a massive drop pod fires down on your land, and out from it pops a Space Marine. 9 foot tall, genetically enhanced, massive hulking murder machine. He's on your side, luckily, and he's here to kill the aliens that are on your planet, which is fantastic because you watch him single-handedly take on hundreds by himself of horrifying, gigantic Xenos, and he will single-handedly kill them all. This event, you would pass this story on for generations to come. It's so rare to see one of these because in comparison to how many Imperial Guardsmen there are, trillions I'm talking, I would say there's only a few million, if that, Space Marines. Probably only around 1 million. Each chapter containing anywhere between a couple hundred and tens of thousands of their troops. They are low in number, but extremely strong. They spread thin, but wherever they do spread, they usually conquer. They are extremely powerful and not to be messed with, and even the Tyranids, when they see them, start to back off.
Ooh. Ooh. Oh, I mean, considering what I've just been informed of the Tyranids now,
So anyone can be a Space Marine, essentially, but you have to be. Basically, not anyone can be one. So that was the wrong thing to say. It's definitely more. You will get taken at around childhood, like around 4 years old, and when you're 6 years old, you'll be put through the trials, and the trials are a series of things that will most likely kill you. 1 in 1 million people sent through the trials, only one will come out. That one will then be subject to more rituals, and if they survive that, they will become a Space Marine and given the powers to become a Space Marine, essentially.
wow.
So it's within 1 million people, only one of them may be a Space Marine. Maybe.
Wow.
So it's 1,000,000 to 1 that you actually be one.
Again, running out of words to say. Like, this world sounds just crazy brutal on all sides.
But because there is so little of them, they are very, very bloodbound. They care for their brothers and they protect their brothers. Even if their brothers die, they will go back and collect their bodies to be properly buried and remembered and put into the logs of their system to be remembered forever.
That's nice.
Yeah. Except when their bodies die on a chaos-infested planet, then they send squads and squads until all the bodies are recovered. So it's kind of almost an infinite loop.
The brothers in arms code to a max.
Yeah. So obviously they don't return the bodies that they actually physically can't, ones that have been blown apart, or ones that are stuck in such an area where it would be a waste of resources to get them. But on the way, if Space Marines are doing some mission, they will go out their way to recover a body if a Space Marine died in a local area. So they actually care about their brothers, and they're very, very strong and bloodbound.
It feels very, very much of the military approach to it. Like we're going to look after our own to ensure you're remembered. So it's again, you've so far you've brought them up to be like weapons of war, which they are.
Yes.
But that's a very human thing that I can't help but appreciate. Like even if we're put to the test of becoming like the ultimate killing machine, there's a part
genetically
of us,
enhanced and changed to be basically abhuman and still containing human traits.
yeah, there's still that element of us that we can't leave you behind because we know what we've all been through, and we're still, in for lack of a better word, we're still family, brothers.
Yeah.
That's again, as you said, this is a brutal world on all sides, but that tiny bit there, that little act of brotherhood, that's very sweet.
Yeah. That's probably the only sweet thing you'll hear. So, next, we got the Sisters of Battle, aka the Adepta Sororitas. They are a militant wing of the Ecclesiarchy, the Imperium's galaxy-wide state region, fiercely worshipping the Emperor of Mankind and his golden throne on Terra, which is 40K's far future Earth. Their lore origins are rather amusing. Due to the diktat that the imperial faith wasn't allowed to have its own force of men under arms, it is instead raised an all-female army of bloodthirsty zealots, armed with an incredibly deadly weapons such that Space Marines hold, such as the bolter guns and power armor corsets. They are unleashed upon the Emperor's enemies. The only difference between the Sisters of Battle and the Space Marines mainly is the Space Marines are genetically enhanced, very tall, very big troops that are all male. The Sisters of Battle are obviously all female, but they are regular humans. They are not genetically enhanced, which makes them fucking badass. They are normal humans just given power armor and bolters.
Okay, so they're basically the equivalent of, we're not going to advance you, but we're going to put you to the test until you're the ultimate human being.
Yes. There's a lot of them compared to Space Marines. Definitely not as much as there are Guardsmen, but there's a lot more of them than Space Marines, so they're able to assist on the Militarium's fronts a lot more often than Space Marines are. And they're a very powerful force to be reckoned with. They love fire. They love burning things. Burning heretics and witches. They love it.
Ooh.
Next, we have the Adeptus Mechanicus. Originating on Mars and allied with the Imperium of Man, the Adeptus Mechanicus is a galaxy-spanning cult made up of technology-worshipping cyborgs, cybernetic servitor constructs, and legions of vast, ancient war machines, including the mighty Warhammer 40K Titans, which are said to be as big as mountains.
Ooh.
Led by tech priests, the Adeptus Mechanicus maintains the Imperium's galactic stocks of spaceships, tanks, aircrafts, weapons, and armor. The AdMech's own armies are made up of the mixture of cyborg Skitarii warriors, robotic battle automania, and high-tech battle war machines. Humans have a thing against automated AI due to the Men of Iron in the time of 20K, where their AI army turned against them and nearly destroyed the entire galaxy. So they are very against any AI. So everything must be run through the Adeptus Mechanicus and done manually.
Wow, I can see why.
Yeah.
Considering that brief description of, we nearly wiped out the entire galaxy.
Yeah, they really don't want that again. Although I think the Adeptus Mechanicus want AI again, but the Emperor just said never again. Let's not do that again. Next, we have the Adeptus Custodes. This is an interesting one, and I'll be mentioning this at the end for a special reason.
Okay.
They are gold-armoured giants of the Adeptus Custodes and are the personal bodyguards of the Emperor of Mankind himself. Bigger, stronger, smarter, and deadlier versions of regular Space Marines, crafted directly from the Emperor's own genes. Originally, there was 10,000 of them, but in the 41st millennium, this force has been whittled down to only just a few hundred. Luckily, each individual custodian is a fighting force unequaled by almost any other being in the galaxy, meaning you'll quite often see a tabletop army of Adeptus Custodes and just a handful. That is just a handful of miniatures strong. They are so. If I was to describe Imperial Guardsmen versus Space Marine, it would probably take 1,000 Imperial Guardsmen to take down a single Space Marine. I would say it would take an entire legion to take down a Custodes. They are strong. They are motherfucking strong. It would take thousands upon thousands of them to actually kill one.
So this would be the equivalent of every army ever trying to go up against Chuck Norris.
Yeah. They're basically armoured Chuck Norrises. And they have a couple hundred of them. But obviously they can't do much but protect the Emperor. If anyone wants to come after the Emperor, they have to fight them. They are strong. So, good luck.
Good luck in just trying to even meet the Emperor, much less get to him in person.
Yeah.
Again, I've said it a few times. I'll say it again. This lore is so cool.
Yeah, honestly, this is why I wanted to talk about it so bad. You can see why I put time into this. So next up, one of my personal favourite army of the Imperium of Man, the Grey Knights. The Grey Knights are a secret order of space marines based on Titan, which is Saturn's largest moon, whose sole job is to hunt down and destroy the demons of chaos. Specifically selected as children from across the Imperium, every Grey Knight is a psyker with a battery of psychic abilities for killing enemies, defending themselves, and banishing demons back to hell. So the Grey Knights are a very secret organisation that are very adept at killing specifically demons. There's this one story of a incredibly powerful demon that the Grey Knights eventually slew after thousands of their brothers fell. And do you know what they did with his soul?
What?
They stuck it in a gem and put it inside of their feast hall so that he could watch for all of eternity their victories and accomplishments for when they come home and just destroyed another demon. They made him watch throughout all of eternity from that little gem.
Shit, that's badass and terrifying.
Yeah. I wonder if the demon itself had eventually become on the side of Grey Knights, my dudes are back. Oh, they won again. Yeah.
He's like, I'm proud to be a prisoner.
Yeah, you get them, boys. What do you mean Larry didn't come back? What do you mean they got him? He actually becomes attached to all of them because they live for a long time and they don't exactly die often. So when one dies, it's a massive tragedy because it's not only hard to be a space marine, it's probably 10 times harder to be a Grey Knight. The difference between how hard it is to become a Grey Knight compared to a Custodes is a Custodes is specifically selected and made by the Emperor, where the others, the Grey Knights, are potentially just normal humans that have been selected, have gone through the trials of being a Space Marine, and are even better than the Space Marines so that they can advance and become a Grey Knight. Essentially. That's a very dumbed down version of it, but yeah.
Yeah, first off, bloody awesome title to have. And the fact that you've just said, we've now got demons.
Oh, yeah. So I didn't explain this, but I might as well explain it now that I've said it. So each Chaos Lord can basically use a bit of their own power to turn into miniature versions of themselves. So Nurgle can make Nurglings, which are little chaos shitheads, and lots of different units like that, and he can spawn them and he can basically throw them into the Immaterium from the chaos dimension. So, but he has to use his own power to do it. So if he does it, it's got to be worthwhile, and he's got to kill more things than he's produced to get his power back, plus more. Same with Khorne. He can produce chaos blood letters and horrible, violent creatures. Tzeentch creates pink, blue, and red horrors and all that kind of stuff. And Slaanesh makes oddly sexy warriors that can slice you in half.
Yeah.
And each, for Slaanesh, they are neither male nor female. They are both. They are male and female. They have one half of the anatomy each. So one side of them is male, and the other side of them has a boob. So it's just interesting. I like the fact that they just made that kind of both. But yeah, they can all spawn creatures and push them into the Immaterium, but they have to use their own power to do it. And that's what the Grey Knight's specifically there to battle, is the demons of chaos.
Okay. Okay, and so the demons have been around roughly around the same length as like
They've been around
creators.
since the gods have been around, yeah.
Wow. Again, so much cool lore.
Yeah. So that is pretty much all the races in Warhammer that I can be bothered to talk about. But before I move on, I'm going to ask Kobi, what's your favourite race and why?
Oh, well, again, I've said it to death at this point. They're all awesome in their own right, but I would have to say I was going to say was it the Tintirium? The Xeno-like ones?
Tyranids.
The Tyranids. I was going to say the Tyranids were my favorite choice, but I'm not gonna lie. I love the. It's hard to, I would have to say like the Orks.
Yeah.
I mean, just for the fact that
in terms of their lore, they're definitely my favourite.
Yeah.
In terms of playing them, I like the Necrons. Building and painting, I like the Necrons. I also collect some Tyranids as well. I love the lore for the Tyranids. I think they're the scariest race, and that's what I love about them, and that they're the Xenos-like. The humans, I usually, when I do anything fantasy, like playing Skyrim or playing any kind of fantasy game, I usually don't pick the humans because I think it's boring. I just don't like the way the humans. I've seen millions of humans, in my life, being a human and all on planet Earth. So I usually don't pick the humans. I pick like the orcs or bad guys or like some weird alien thing, because I find it more interesting. I know what humans are like. Whereas in this world specifically, they're a lot more interesting, I think, than in a lot of sci-fis and fantasies.
Yeah, I should make things clear here for me, for my part at least. Those two are definitely my favourite on the bad guy. I say bad guy because they're all bad in their own way.
Yeah, I would say there's no good or bad. The closest to being good is Tau, and they're still questionable. So
yeah, but I gotta say, I mean, the Grey Knights, they sound awesome as an order. The was it Spartans? You said
the Space Marines.
Yeah, the Space Marines. Yeah.
Custodes, which were the giant Space Marines, the Emperor's Guard.
Yeah, I mean,
Sisters of Battle, Adeptus Mechanicus, and the Astra Militarum.
Yeah, I mean, God, there's so many complex names to try and remember.
Yes,
I'm amazed you've been able to write this all down, try and remember all of them individually.
But most of this was in my head, so.
God damn, they're so cool. But I would say, at least on from what you've just been able to brief me on all of this, really, I do think the Orks were a definite standout. Although I do think the Tyranids definitely come a close second, just because of how, again, it's also fascinatingly scary and also richly interesting in how just they run themselves with their conflicts with the war. And again, we'll say this a bit more for the actual ending segment, but I'm really eager to see how they would be handled in a story.
Yeah, I'd love to see how it all comes together, and that is exactly what we'll talk about just after this last segment. So let's move on to our next major event in history. A very, very brief and summarized rundown of the Horus Heresy. So do shout at me in the comments if I get anything specifically wrong, but I'm not going to lie. Horus Heresy, I don't know ridiculous amounts about. They have a ton of books on the Horus Heresy. It's a very popular timeline in the history of Warhammer because it was the biggest, most devastating civil war in Imperial history. But I don't know ridiculous too much about it because, like I said earlier, I don't usually tend to learn about the humans the most. I tend to learn mostly about the Xenos races because I find them far more interesting. But it's important to talk about the Horus Heresy even briefly, just to get an idea of what this show might actually be about, because it could actually contain elements of the Horus Heresy.
Okay.
Even if it's events after the Horus Heresy, then it may contain elements still from it even 10,000 years later in the events of 40K. So I would say it's important to have a little rundown of what the whole hullabaloo was about.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So to start off the events of the Horus Heresy, I'm going to talk about the Primarchs. The Primarchs were 20 genetically engineered transhuman sons of the Emperor of Mankind, created in the late 30th millennium. They were intended to be the immortal and superhuman generals who would command the Emperor's Great Crusade's armies and reunite the scattered human race beneath his leadership. Their genomes later served as the genetic templates from which the Emperor crafted his 20 Space Marine chapters. The Primarchs were bred to be perfect generals, warriors, and statesmen, larger, stronger, faster, and smarter than any normal human that could ever hope to be. They possessed a potent charisma and martial prowess that made them like the mythical gods of old, untouchable by disease, old age, or supposedly the petty failings of lesser men. Each embodied an aspect of war. One was the greatest strategist ever known, another was a personification of the terror of war, a third the master of psychic powers, the fourth the greatest practitioner of arts of fortification, and so on. The Primarchs were the Emperor's answer to reclaiming all the lost worlds of mankind. The Emperor intended to raise his sons to be the best military commanders and potential leaders in human history. They would bring the imperial truth to the rest of the human-settled galaxy in their father's name, serving as his generals and commanders. But the Chaos Gods intervened to foil their greatest adversary's plans, and the Primarchs were spirited away through the warp to other human-settled planets scattered throughout the galaxy. Deprived of the Emperor's care and guidance, each developed a personality uniquely shaped to where they were born, and sometimes damaged by the difficult circumstances of their homeworlds. Yet, for all their gifts, the Primarchs were still only men, and in the end their all-too-human flaws would become the primary obstacle and the realization of the Emperor's greatest dream. So now I'm going to list off the Primarchs and what chapter they were involved with and in charge of.
Okay.
So we have Horus himself. He was the leader of the Lunar Wolves. Layman Russ, he is in charge of the Space Wolves. Ferrus Manus was in charge of Iron Hands. Fulgrim was in charge of the Emperor's Children. Vulcan was in charge of the Salamanders. Rogel Dawn was in charge of the Imperial Fists. Robut Gilliman was in charge of the Ultramarines. Magnus the Red was in charge of the Thousand Sons. Sanguinius was in charge of the Blood Angels. Lionel Johnson was in charge of the Dark Angels. Perturbo was in charge of the Iron Warriors. Mortarion was in charge of the Death Guard. Lorgar was in charge of the Word Bearers. Jagati Khan was in charge of the White Scars. Conrad Kurz was in charge of the Night Lords. Angron was in charge of the World Eaters. Corvus Corax was in charge of the Raven Guard. Alferus Omegan was in charge of the Alpha Legion. And the last two chapters were redacted and we have no information on them. Ooh. They were all completely wiped from Imperial records for some reason. There is slight hints to why, although I can't go deep into that now. It's a lot.
Interesting.
The Emperor eventually rallied all of his lost sons and set them to work conquering the galaxy. Then the Emperor disappeared into his throne room, locked himself away, and started working on his next project. Horus and some of the other Emperor's sons felt abandoned and betrayed by him. Horus being the closest to the Emperor and the Emperor's thought favourite, feels the most abandoned and the most tortured by this. So he gathers whatever Primaris. So he gathers all of the Primarchs and tries to get them over to his side and revolt, which starts the Horus Heresy. Half of them join, half of them don't. And there's a lot of events that happen during the Horus Heresy, which I can't get into now because it is ridiculously long. If I was just to talk about the Horus Heresy, we would need 4 more podcasts. I'm not even kidding. It's huge. So Horus was basically manipulated by chaos and turns to chaos. And then they become the final race, which I didn't talk about specifically because I wanted to talk about it now, the Chaos Space Marines.
Oh boy.
So the Chaos Space Marines, there's a couple factions within them, like the Death Guard and all that. I'm not going to go into that too much because it's almost like doing another whole thing with the Space Marines. But yeah, they become a lot of different factions, some worshipping certain chaos gods over others, some worshipping them all at the same time, and some just not caring and killing. So Space Marines turned evil. That's scary.
Yeah, damn right.
So now that we have discussed everything I wanted to talk about for the lore, I just want to know, what's your opinion on Warhammer overall right now?
Well, gotta say, it's definitely it sounds like a very rich lore. And again, this is all just from the backstory. So, color me impressed. And I'm speaking here as someone who loves lore, loves reading, especially when it comes to very detailed worlds that have a lot of creativity with them, especially when it's done well. You've given, you've given me a lot of, more, not just insight, but more so interest, I guess, in what could be explored in a story like this.
And knowledge about the universe itself.
Mm.
So you know what Warhammer is and how dark and grim it is.
I mean, I think what's notable is just really how I like how really it's just everyone has their messed up way of doing what they do, but you can pretty much just see, as you said, how it all started with them. I mean, with the Necrons, just that's such a messed up origin story, but it makes you think. No, no wonder.
It sets you in the scene of what's to come as well.
Yeah, and it makes you think. No wonder they are a race to be feared just from the name. But then you tell me about the Orks and how they can just like take over a planet by just if one of them just manages
being
to get
there.
Yeah. And then there's the God damn it, the
Tyranids.
name, the Tyranids. Again, I really want to see a Tyranid in action now. I mean, yeah. Again, I can't really add. Just judging from my voice alone, you can tell I can't really think of much to elaborate on other than I think this is so creative with the world they've been able to create. I'm amazed that I haven't really gotten into it myself because this all sounds really fascinating.
Yeah.
And if anything, this has gotten me even more excited for the potential that we could be seeing for a TV show based on this world.
Yeah. I can't wait to see what they might actually do. But speaking of, we should probably discuss what could possibly happen.
Indeed. So, for a bit more context, if it wasn't obvious already, there is a TV show based on Warhammer is in development. It was announced like roughly around December, I believe, by the actor himself, Henry Cavill, that he would be starring in and also producing the TV show. And as of then, we have no idea what the plot is going to be about, who Henry's playing, or if the show is even going to go forward at all. Because they just announced, we are working on it. But I guess, as you said, there's plenty of lore that they could pull from, and I believe they have specified it is going to be the 40K part of the lore.
Yeah.
And
that is what Henry Cavill knows best as well. That is the one he follows. So, and it's the most popular as well. So, that I think they'll 100% go for the 40k. There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, although he has met, I think it was also mentioned in the Instagram post that we could see more from that. It could be go beyond if it's popular. It could go beyond the 40k because he also acknowledged that this would be like the first in like another big franchise cinematic universe approach to it. So again, if they manage to play their cards right and they actually do well, we could see more beyond 40k. We could see 30k or like
Fantasy.
fantasy. Yeah, there's again a lot of ground they could cover if they want to kick this off into a big franchise. But going back to 40k, this is why I put it to you. What do you think the story could be about? Because judging from the big lore that you just gave me, I could think of they could easily just do a show, a mini series about archaeologists just discovering the Necrons,
Yeah.
or we could find out about how did the Orks, a mini series about the Orks. I mean, there's so much you could do. But what do you think could be the lore story?
I've thought about this a lot. I've thought about what they should, shouldn't, and could do. Now, the most popular storyline in 40k is the Horus Heresy. However, the Horus Heresy is massive. You'd need multiple seasons of a TV show to even come close to grazing the surface of that story. I think it's too big and too intimidating and too ambitious for them to go for it. I think they shouldn't. I think they should leave the Horus Heresy alone, which is 30k, and concentrate on the events of 40k, even making their own story or doing one of the stories that is already within 40k, one of the hundreds and hundreds of stories. For Henry Cavill, I think he will obviously be in the human race. What part of the human race, though, I have internal debates about. He could be Acadian shock trooper, which is just basically a better Imperial Guardsman. He could just be a ground troop. It would just be a story of him as a ground troop and his group being overrun by the Tyranids. He's on a military planet, and all of a sudden Tyranids attack, and they just get left to defend, basically. That could be an absolutely amazing story. All they have to do is concentrate on the characters and the way the world is, if it's very 40k or not. If they want to do something a bit more risque, but equally as cool, they could make Henry Cavill a Custodes, one of the Emperor's chosen guards, one of the massive ones. Basically superfy him, like in Superman. he killed that role. So, if he could play kind of like that, this super strong guy that is put to the test, battling all known Xenos horror with a small squad. It could be a kill team going through a space Hulk, which is a giant abandoned spaceship, basically filled with Xenos horrors. So, in my head, there's almost endless number of things that they could do. What I would like to see, however, is him either as a space marine or as an Imperial Guardsman up against Tyranids, specifically Tyranids, or Eldar. I don't really want to see Orks on screen. I would love to. However, I think in a TV show sense, they wouldn't be able to animate them very well. It would be very difficult, very expensive, having so many moving things on screen because they are a swarm species, and I think they would look quite goofy on screen, some big orcs like that, because they are quite cartoonish. To make it more serious and scary, I think a good alternative would be Tyranids. Makes them more threatening, and we've done aliens looking horrifying on screen. You can make them all oozy and gooey, whereas orcs are not very scary. They're just numerous, and they're very big and angry. It's kind of like having lots and lots of Hulks on screen, and we know how She-Hulk went, so I kind of don't want to see them do another TV show with that much green.
Yeah.
So I've kind of been traumatized. So I would rather see Tyranids on screen, and him as a space marine, either saving an Imperial Guard squad's group in like a Saving Private Ryan-esque type of journey, or him as an Imperial Guardsman getting absolutely battered but somehow surviving each time, and then near the end, Space Marines come and help them. So, in terms of fleshed out actual story, I can't even begin to guess. I'm not going to lie. I'm not even going to attempt.
Yeah, I mean, judging from that little tidbit that you gave me, I'm already thinking of they could approach it like a one season storyline or like a mini series where, as you said, Henry Cavill is like what you said,
just kind of like bringing the universe to life for the first time on the big screen, or like not even on the big screen because it's not a film, it's a TV show, but like just bringing it to life for everyone first off, rather than jumping right into the deep end. It's probably a better option.
Yeah, I mean, you had me worried a second when you described how there's no basic story for them to follow, so it would have to be an original story. But
it doesn't have to necessarily be an original story. It's just that the stories that are fleshed out are book length.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a part of me is thinking back to Rings of Power, how they just butchered the few big storyline points they had so they could tell their own story, and that didn't work out. And I just feel like, I don't hope that doesn't happen here, because as excited as I am for this series now, it's still being made by Amazon, who took those liberties with Tolkien.
However, they are working with Henry Cavill and have made him a producer, which they didn't. They weren't producers in our show. And producer has a big say in what happens in the show. Henry Cavill knows his shit, and he will walk away if he thinks they're doing the wrong thing, just like he did Witcher.
Yeah.
So they will not fuck around with Henry Cavill because he will fuck off.
Yeah.
And half the reason people were excited for this show is they want to see Henry Cavill in it. Like, I'm half excited it's Warhammer, and I'm half excited it's Henry Cavill.
Yeah, I mean, I understand there's like so many moving parts when it comes to Hollywood, but they'd be idiots to decide to go their own way or take extreme liberties. Because I know at the end of the day, when you're telling a story, you can't be 100% authentic. You have to be either really skilled or you have to be really like in depth with what you want to tell. But at the same time, these last few years, we've just seen how high-profile studios have just taken their own liberties just to tell their own agenda or their own story, just because we want to. And I feel like in the case of Henry Cavill, if he was to suddenly say, "I'm not doing this anymore," why? Oh, because they want to tell their own story. I feel like they would definitely fall into the same trap that Rings of Power.
I think if they did want to tell their own story, though, unlike Rings of Power, which is one set linear story, Warhammer is filled with tons and tons of linear stories. So something that could be acceptable is the fact that they do that. Maybe they do want to make their own story and diverse from the normal Warhammer stuff. That could actually work in the Warhammer universe specifically. What I'm kind of hoping they don't do is make Henry Cavill the Emperor.
Oh, really?
Kind of. I've got an idea if they do want to do that, but in terms of making Henry Cavill the Emperor is meant to be a very powerful kind of mystical being. It's almost kind of sacrilegious to show him on screen. So I don't know how the Warhammer fans would take it, especially if they do the Emperor in the wrong light. He's very godlike, but he's also extremely human. He has to play him perfectly. The biggest picked faction in all of Warhammer is the humans, is the Militarium and the Space Marines. The Space Marines is the most favourable chapter. The Space Marines is the most favourable faction of all of Warhammer, just because they look so cool, and they're humans, they're superhumans, and they're absolutely brutal. Like, everyone loves them. So a lot of people know the stories behind them and the lore behind them. And if they focus too much on the Emperor, that could upset a lot of people potentially. And I kind of don't want to see the Emperor on screen, because I want to focus on the events of 40k rather than 30k, where the Emperor is on a giant golden throne and he's immobile and he only talks to very specific people that go into a room and claimed they spoke to him. There's not actually any real claims that he's actually alive. He might be just a dead corpse on that throne. Who knows? And no one really knows what happened. So there's a big kind of gap there that they could fill, but that is scary territory, I think, for them to go through. In terms of if they did do it, though, one storyline that they could follow that might be very, very interesting, especially for a TV show, is the journey the Emperor goes on to find all of his Primarchs that were scattered around by the Chaos Gods, which starts off all the Space Marines.
Okay.
That could be cool. Because then he'd be essentially a super soldier jumping from world to world, facing almost every race. You get to see every race on screen, absolutely slaughtering them with his psychic powers. The only thing is, with the Emperor, if anything gets a bit too close to him, he can just blow it up with his mind powers. That's how strong he is. Nothing much is a threat to him. There was one story where an Ork got very close to killing him, but even then people say that is either hearsay or him pretending just to get the Ork closer so he could kill it. There's a lot of things that can happen with the Emperor, but I think the one storyline that they could potentially follow that might be interesting is the finding of the Primarchs.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I gotta... I mean, a part of me is still skeptical of the whole approach to it with Amazon, just because of how they handled Lord of the Rings. So a part of me is concerned if they do approach it with an original story. But I think you have put a good point through with the fact that there's so much lore that it probably would be in their best interest to tell an original story, provided it is faithful to that world and they don't try and change.
Yeah, as long as it's brutal, grim, dark, no peace, no happiness, just battle after battle with bloodshed after bloodshed, they can't really go wrong.
Yeah, I mean, again, just from the description you gave earlier for Henry Cavill's approach to it, I'm actually quite favoured of the idea of them doing a one-season storyline where Henry is like the top-tier human candidate or something for whatever that race.
They could even do a whole show of him becoming a Space Marine.
They could, but I feel that. I mean, we've all got that mental image of him in the blue armor, which is quite very popular right now. But that race you mentioned, where they were just like normal humans, but they were like the top tier of humans in the conflict. What were they called again?
You mean the Sisters of Battle? You can't be one of those.
No. But I meant the other ones because
Custodes.
Are they the Emperor's Guards?
They're the Emperor's Guards, yeah.
No, there was you mentioned another one earlier. I was going to jump.
Astra Military. Cadian Shock Troops.
Yes.
Which are just like very strong Imperial Guardsmen.
Yes.
Like veterans.
Yeah, I imagine he could have probably been. He could be one of those, and it's the first season is literally his journey of becoming that. So it's starts off as a very grounded story where it's this guy just trying to do his part for the Empire, and you see his journey of him fighting the Necroids, or was it the alien ones?
Wait, what journey are you talking about?
Primarily, I guess I'm approaching this to the equivalent of it's just a normal Marine putting his all into his effort for the war, fighting against an alien race, or like
the Tyranids.
That's the race, the Tyranid race.
Yeah.
Because I do like the idea that you put forward that we haven't seen much of them in Warhammer action.
Yeah.
So to have them be the center of the antagonists, the central antagonists for a TV show, and you've got Henry Cavill who approaches this from a very human perspective of I'm here to help the cause, and you see his journey from the beginning as a humble farmman trying to to start where he did, and you get to the end of the story where he's like doing his part, and maybe he dies, maybe he doesn't die. But I think the first season, they need to tell an almost relatable story in this big world of chaos.
Yeah.
And if they can get that right, if they can get us introduced to the world, and you can see
it's a massive task to make it relatable. Very massive task, but I hope they can do it.
Maybe. I mean, I'm just picturing this now. You start off with Henry as a very simple guy who just has a humble beginning, and then he joins the war. He sees much, but he keeps going. He keeps fighting, and in the last episode, I'm picturing this scenario. In the last episode, he's on his legs. He's down. He's maybe dying or wounded severely. You've got one of the enemies approaching him, and the big blue guys, they jump down, and you see him react, and you see them look at him for a second, then they go back and they start charging and fighting and helping him. Well, not helping him, but they do their part, and in turn they save him. That would be
his angels.
Yeah, his angels. That would be a great moment to for Warhammer fans, for Warhammer fans, and I think.
By the way, a lot of my just a quick shout out. A lot of my information I got from a podcast called Lorehammer, which you, funny enough, mistakenly just said. And yeah, they are very good. If you want more in-depth lore of Warhammer, go listen to them. They are amazing.
Oh, neat. I'll have to check them out afterwards. But yeah, I think that would be a great scene to see and to conclude the series. And depending on where they go forward, if they get good enough interest to get a second season going forward, maybe they could continue with Henry, or maybe they could continue with that Space Marine.
Yeah.
So they could
they could do absolutely anything there. They could do absolutely anything. It would be as long as it's violent and blood filled, I'd be happy.
God, yeah. I mean, I guess in a round and closing off, you've gotten me more excited because originally when I heard about this, I was just happy because thank God Henry's got a job because he is a great actor. He was clearly underused in the DCEU. I have not bothered to watch The Witcher past the first few episodes of the first season because at the time I was in a few other things, and then I heard how bad it got, and then I heard that he left. I'm like, poor guy, this guy can't catch a break. The bloody studios are ruining it.
He's had a very difficult time recently, so hopefully he has a bit easier time with Warhammer, and hopefully he has more say in it because he actually knows the lore, and I actually trust him because he likes Warhammer.
Yeah, I mean, considering again he's such a big fan about it and he's open about it, I hope this is like the perfect scenario for him because I want to see a good show from people who clearly love it, and I want to see them give their all, and I want to see the studios realize we've got something here. Let's not fuck it up just because we have egos or we have an agenda we want to tell. No, we've got people. I want to see a show where people have put their all into it and they are proud of it.
There better not be a reference that takes me out of that world and into the real world again through some fucking empowerment message or something like that. Just if I don't think it's possible to be taken out of the Warhammer universe because it's meant to be so different. It's meant to be. If they do that, they fucked up the entire show.
Mm.
So hopefully not, and hopefully they keep it interesting.
God, fingers crossed, mate, because there's a lot that we could expect, and if the day should come, I look forward to seeing the first episode, seeing what they do with this show, and I can say this much: you've definitely piqued my interest in this world. So if they put out a new game, I might consider checking it out because I'm already quite invested.
It's that's the thing with the games as well, is it's made by lots and lots of different developers. So if you want a specific Warhammer game, come to me and I will tell you the best ones.
Okay, I will definitely look into your verdict.
Also in the comments section, if any of you guys out there are interested in learning a bit more about Warhammer, again, the Lorehammer podcast is a great way to actually listen to the lore. But if you're not too interested in the lore and just like the universe for how chaotic and violent it is, I'd recommend playing some of the games like Dawn of War or Warhammer Vermintide or Darktide. They are amazing. They are absolutely amazing. They really capture how brutal that world is. And yeah, if anyone in the comments section wants to know a good game to play based on certain things that you like in a game, feel free to ask and I will reply.
Damn. So, yeah, that's the episode for today. And for close off, I've just got to say this. Thank you again so much, Lennon, for one thing, giving me such a lot of insight into our potential projects that I'm now looking forward to more than ever. But thank you again so much for just taking the lead in this one.
No worries, it's fun to do.
It feels like such a change up, which it is, and I'm just like,
yeah, I'd let you sit back and have a break for once and get talked to this time.
Yeah, but I still had so much fun, and I can't thank you enough for setting this all up. Because, again, this episode was just going to be another, let's talk about some movie news or some recent drama and such, which would have been fun still. But I'm so happy that we just got to talk about something that you were so passionate about, and it really showed through. And I enjoyed it so much, mate. So thank you. Thank you for letting me be part of that.
Thank you for letting me talk shit for 2 hours about stuff I love. Blood for the blood gods, skulls for the skull throne and all that.